I'm not going to start with any easy questions.
What would you do if you couldn't fail?
I was vulnerable in the sense of I was just who I was.
In my journey as an entrepreneur, I really found who I am as a human.
I was much more emotionally available to everyone because I was much more balanced.
Finding the grace and the humor in the balance of it all.
Whatever happens in the gut happens in the brain, and whatever happens in the brain happens in the gut.
Do you have a specific morning routine?
I was able to sort of reset my nervous system by getting involved with the cold.
Allow ourselves to have imperfection.
Absolutely had mentors, absolutely 100% had coaches.
A wake-up call to me that I could not try to be something I'm not.
Seeing results of just isolating the breathing was having these tremendous impacts on my physiology.
Work at a gratitude practice.
What the hell am I doing? Can I really do this? Is this really worth it?
90+% of the decisions that we make today actually stem from fear.
When was I proud of myself today?
I think for me, it's really inspiring people to step out. And you don't have to step all the way out.
Then there are these other moments of magic and joy.
If we can just push into discomfort, we actually find that on the other end, there's a lot of benefit.
What's your purpose?
Nothing starts without a plan. Nothing ever goes to plan.
I think we're going to see a new realm of healing that ultimately wasn't available to us.
If we can bring a practice into our lives that helps us be more vulnerable.
So much of entrepreneurship, I truly believe, to anybody on this call is grit.
I got involved with Wim. I just love the guy. He's just a great human. When people are on the path, they shine.
We so often convert things into flaws as opposed to strengths.
We all deserve to be happy, healthy, and strong.
I'm so thrilled that this content is getting out there, that you guys are promoting bold and vulnerable message and aspirations for people, because I hope that we can all really live that every day.
Hey, this is Jessica.
And Svetlana, and you're listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast,
Where we aim to inspire others to live authentically through sharing the bold and vulnerable stories of peak performers across a variety of industries.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast, where we get real, raw, and bold. And today I'm really, really excited because we have a very special guest and a very dear, dear friend of mine on the show. And it's actually Jess. And so today I'm going to be interviewing Jess on her family life pillar. We're going to get to know Jess on a much deeper level, just like you guys got to know me on a deeper level on our last episode. So I'm really excited, and I'm just going to start right off, Jess. I'm going to just start with the basics. Where are you from? Do you have any siblings? What does your family tree look like?
Yeah, so let me start by just saying I'm both challenged and grateful to talk about this topic, and challenged because I'm introverted when it comes to talking about my personal life and my family, and grateful because I know once I push past the discomfort and this thing is out there in the world, that it may touch someone's life, and it certainly will touch mine, because I know I'll grow from the discomfort of talking about it. And I think Svetlana knows that I've been pushing this recording back and back and back for weeks because just because out of fear. And I'm glad that, we're finally recording it. But my hope is that from hearing this, everyone that's listening can reflect on your own family pillar and what you define as family, and how you can take a peek at your own epigenetics and your own ancestry and your own family tree, where you came from, or how you maybe created a family. If you don't have a family that's your own, maybe how you created that. So that's my hope for today. I'm excited to get started. Thanks, Svetlana, for the beautiful introduction. So just as everyone's listening to this and to Svetlana's family life pillar segment, just a question that you can take with you is, can you explore where you are today so that you can understand and appreciate your family life pillar more, and create some connections with your family lineage that maybe you didn't know before? So that's my challenge for everyone. But to get into Svetlana's question, where was I born, raised, do I have siblings, all that good stuff. So my life has been shaped by many events. I'm just grateful for how I grew up and where I grew up, and my parents. And I have one sister who's about a year and some change older than me. And in terms of my family tree, I guess we could start there. So family tree on my dad's side, my paternal grandmother's family comes from Quebec, so French Canadian. Their last name, they were the Jubenvilles, so they came over back in 1815 to Massachusetts. Rather, they came to Massachusetts in 1869, and my mom actually helped me with a lot of this, a lot of the years and when they came and all this good stuff. So it was really fun to prepare for this podcast. So in 1869, the Jubenvilles came over from Quebec, and my paternal grandma, we called her Grandma Honey, her father was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts, and that's where my grandparents lived. So I knew Holyoke, which is out in Western Mass, and I used to visit all the time, and my aunt still lives out in that area in East Hampton, and so that area where they first came is really near and dear to my heart, and it's really cool to know that they had been there for so long. And then a lot of the other side of the family, on the paternal side, they remained in Quebec, so the last names are French, and that lineage comes from that side of the family. And then on my paternal grandfather's side, they came directly from Ireland. So Sears, that name, came from Ireland. They lived in Dingle, Ireland, and my great-grandfather's wife was named Ellie, and she was from Belmullet, Ireland. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And yeah, my grandfather was a true Irishman. I mean, he married my Grandma Honey, and so it was like an Irish and French-Canadian mixture to create my dad's side of the family. And they had two kids, my dad and my Aunt Chris. And, you know, I've got cousins on that side, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how deep we want to go. But essentially, that whole side of the family was a fairly strict household. They were Catholic, and I just remember stories from my dad knowing how strict that my grandparents were just in their household. And they were very clean. I just remember my grandmother's house always being very, very clean. Like, there was no trinkets, like nothing was out of place. All the tables were very empty, if you will. Like, there was not a lot of stuff in the house. So they were very minimal, clean people, from what I remember as a kid. And they were together for over 80 years. So, you know, my grandfather recently passed away, but my grandmother passed before him, and they were together for a really long time. My grandfather was in Vietnam, so he was a machine gun soldier, and I think that I took some of the pain from that through my DNA. You know, he would sometimes tell stories about the war and all of that near the end of his life when he was in a nursing home, so that it was just kind of interesting because he never talked about it. But then, you know, nearing the end of his life, he was kind of going through, you know, spits of memories and things like that, and he would randomly start talking about it. So it was just beautiful to hear some of the stories, but also painful, you know, because you could see the pain from him. But yeah, my grandfather was really musical. He loved to sing. He was in a barbershop. He was always singing Sinatra around the house and just old jazz, and he absolutely adored my grandmother. We called her Grandma Honey, and he called her the boss. And yeah, so my grandfather was amazing, and my Grandma Honey was amazing as well. I miss them both. They're both since passed. And then on my mom's side, maternal side, they were the Fullers, my mom's maiden name. So my maternal grandfather was a Fuller. And they were living in between like Maine, Providence, Rhode Island, and on Cape Cod in Orleans, which is where my mother grew up. And then on my maternal grandmother's side, they were Parkers and Whedons. And my great-grandfather was David Taylor Parker, who was born in 1888, and he was born in Boston. And he actually died, I found out, on April 10th, which is my birthday. So that was kind of interesting to hear some of that death and birth and life kind of making a full circle. And he died on Cape Cod, and I was born on Cape Cod. But yeah, my great-grandmother was Vera May Whedon, and she was from Nova Scotia. So her family came from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and my grandmother, Ellen, was born in 1918 in Connecticut, and she moved to Cape Cod in Orleans, where my mom was born. So she married my grandfather, Herbert Lynn Fuller, and he was born in 1911, and he died in 1996, so I didn't really know him that well. But the memories I do have when I was really, really young are that just the way he smelled, the way he read the newspaper in his little coffee space, and I just remember little tics about him. And he was a big man. I mean, he was kind of scary to me because I was so little. But looking back, he just seemed like a man of wisdom, and I know my mom really loved him. My Grammy Fuller died recently as well in 2016, and she died at the wonderful young age of 98. But I would visit her in the nursing home, and she was always telling stories, and some were true, some were dreamlike, but she was a woman who knew what she wanted until death. She would never have her nails clipped. They would always have to be filed. Those poor nurses, and like her hair always had to be cut a certain way, and she never wore pants, always skirts. She was a very strict woman from what my mom tells me, and she used to watch us when we were in preschool and things like that when we were really young, and so I attribute my manners to her. She was always very strict, and that's where we learned most of our manners. But my mom had 6 siblings altogether, so she had a really big family, and the ages were really large as well. Like her sister is, I believe, like 20 years older than her, so she doesn't even know, really, like she never lived with her sister, which is so different than I think that what we see in people's families nowadays, where the age gaps aren't typically that far apart. So that's my family tree. My mom and dad are now Searses. I have one sibling, as I mentioned earlier, my sister Julie, and she's a little over a year older than me, but we were always a year apart in school, so always really close. And now she has 2 boys of her own, so she's now a Pasquino, and she's got 2 little boys. So I just hit the jackpot of sisters. But yeah, I don't know if we want to go into like epigenetics and things that have passed down.
What I wanted to ask was, who do you feel influenced you the most, and how did they influence you? And when you started talking about the epigenetics with your grandpa, things like that, what do you mean by that? Like, do you, like, not just by watching his war stories and things like that, but like, do you feel like you may have inherited certain traits from them that you didn't even realize were was passed down to you until later on?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I would say, with my paternal grandfather, Grandpa Jim, he was a man of really strong integrity. And that's something that I definitely hold near to my heart, because I consider myself to be somebody of the utmost integrity, and being somebody that well, thanks. Yeah, no, he was just a guy that he said he was going to do something, and he did it. And he had integrity to himself, and he was not a pushover in any way, shape, or form, but he treated my Grandma Honey like a goddess. I mean, he called her the boss, like she was his queen, and they had such a beautiful relationship. And I learned so much from just watching him, and he was like a good old man, you know what I mean? Like he's of course a war veteran, so he served the country in a time that was, really rough on people psychologically, but he never really talked about it again until like really late in life, when he was in the soldiers' home, when we were visiting him in the nursing home, and it's like, he had some form of Alzheimer's, dementia, they were pumping him with morphine and shit, and I don't know how much that controls, your psyche, but he started telling stories, and I recorded some of them, but I didn't get a lot. I wasn't always prepared for him to just start talking about something like that. So it was interesting to hear it. He definitely had a lot of psychological pain, more than physical pain, that happened with him in the war, and I think that that's really what he was passing down to my dad, who I think struggles with psychological pains and maybe burdens of that, and perhaps that was passed down. My Grandma Honey was somebody that I think I took just like laughter and love of life and just joy from, because she was always joking and laughing, and she's kind of a witty woman. She would kind of lean in and tell me a secret joke when I was a kid, and we would just be laughing, and nobody would know what we were laughing at, but she was just that kind of person that she wasn't over the top. She wasn't like, look at me, but she was really funny, and she would, if you were sitting next to her, she would lean in and tell a hilarious joke about something that was happening in the room. So she was really just observant and a really wonderful listener, and she knew how to laugh, and I loved that about her. But I think, so that side of the family, and my Grandma Honey, like she struggled with weight a lot. And I think that's something that side of the family, my grandfather didn't really struggle with weight, but my grandmother did. And, I saw a picture of her when she was in 1930, and she's on this bicycle, and she's this beautiful, skinny woman who's just top of her game, and that, when I knew her, she was always way overweight. So I just never knew that other person. But there's pictures of her when she's, really, really in shape, and, not that that's everything, but I just never knew her like that. And then on my mom's side, things that are passed down like epigenetically. I mean, I think I didn't know my grandfather that well, but my grandmother was very stern, very set in her ways, very much knew exactly what she wanted, and she got it. And I think I get a little bit of that from her. Like, I can be stubborn. I definitely know what I want, and I go after it. And she was strict. She was strict with us and with my mom too. So I think that I take some of that.
How do you feel like all of this shaped you? Like maybe your parents per
Yeah.
se, right? Because they're the ones that, were your primary caretakers, right? Like how did it shape them, and how did it in essence shape you?
Yeah. So for me, my dad, I think, is somebody who I just craved his love. And when I was younger, I was like a tomboy. So I think that I wanted his love so badly, and I wanted to be a tomboy. I wanted to be like one of the boys. I wanted to hang out with my dad a lot. And my sister was kind of the opposite. She wanted to be with my mom. She was more the person who was like, I wouldn't say girly, because we both went through a phase that was tomboy, and then we kind of came out of it. And I think maybe every child goes through that, or some children go through that. But she very much wanted to please my mom, and I was very much like after my dad's attention as a young kid. And I don't know where that comes from, but I was always like skiing with my dad. I wanted to be the fastest. I wanted to be able to catch up to him. I was a ski racer. Like, a lot of the things that I did when I was young, I did to make my dad proud. And so, I would do all these ski races and stuff. Really, what was in it for me? Oh, I got a cool pin, like, from the ski mountain. But like, really, I really wanted to please my dad and just show my dad, like, hey, I'm going to do this because you love skiing and I want to love skiing too. And, I've since grown out of that. I'm kind of like, I don't care what anyone thinks of me, including my parents, but like when I was younger, I really wanted to please my dad, and I started doing martial arts when I was younger. So again, like another sport that's typically like a male-dominated sport. I was one of the only females that was I started martial arts in 2nd grade. And so I was really young, and it taught me more about integrity and grit, and I was a small kid, so that being small was kind of cool, and it taught me to respect elders and taught me the love of fitness and things like that. But again, I attribute that to wanting to be like a tomboy, wanting to please my dad. So yeah, I mean, I was all over the place. I considered myself really unique in that I was doing sports and soccer and cheerleading and dance, which is super athletic. And then on the other side of that, I also was taking voice lessons and singing, and I did theater. And all throughout high school, being on the cheerleading team, it was hard to juggle the artistic side with my athletic side. And so I definitely had to make sure that my coaches and instructors and teachers knew where I was, so no one thought that I was missing rehearsals or practices. And I really made it work. In theater, we did The Wiz, we did Grease, and it was so much fun for me. And I joined this company called the All Cape Theatrical, and we ended up doing some really professional performances of Chicago, which was one of my favorites. And then we ended up doing one of the most unforgettable performances of my life. We did Les Mis, and it was so professionally done, and I wish I had a recording of it somewhere. So if you're out there and you have a recording of Les Miserables when we were in the show together, please send it to me, because I would love to look back at that. But yeah, I mean, I had this crazy mixture, and I was always pulling myself internally between my athletic side and my artistic side, and I feel like I've finally had a chance to marry those together. But when I was young, I wanted to try everything, which I don't necessarily consider a bad thing. And my family, thank God, was so supportive of that. My mom and dad were so supportive of me trying so many different things and seeing what I liked. And I've never really thanked them for that. It's a financial burden on them as well. I'm not even aware of what they were paying for me to do all that stuff. I'm doing martial arts for years and years and years. And from 2nd grade all the way to present. I've got my 3rd degree black belt in martial arts. So it's one of those things where like, I didn't realize that my parents were paying for all of these things, because when you're a kid, you don't think about that stuff. But I'm so grateful for them because they allowed me, as middle-class parents, they're both teachers. So by no means do I want to paint a picture that my life was some sort of a rich kid life on Cape Cod, because there are those people, and that's a beautiful life as well. But my life was not that. And I'm sure that they really worked hard for my sister and I to be doing all these things. And so I'm so grateful for that and grateful for those opportunities. But, going back to marrying that athletic side with the artistic side, I was doing all of those athletic things, and then also getting into theater and getting into the arts. And in high school, I was really into art. I was painting, drawing, pastels, pottery. I was always into art, and I had a wonderful art teacher, Miss Simpson, and I loved her so much. I mean, she just allowed us to be free, and it was a beautiful experience to dive into art. And that's where I feel like I've taken my artistic side more into what I do now on social media, and how I'm able to do a lot of the marketing for myself and building my brand for myself, because I do have that background with artistic design and creative design, and really creating a brand for yourself. And so that's where I feel like I've taken that from. Also, something to note is that I journaled. I kept a journal throughout high school and middle school. So when I was really young, I mean, I want to say from like probably 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade onward, I had a journal, and I wrote in it every single day, every day. So in my parents' basement right now, bless my mom's heart, there's probably like 25 journals in there, maybe more, that depict every single day I would write. And, I got a little bit more graceful with myself in high school, and I allowed myself not to write every day. But for a while, I was strict about it, strict on myself. I had these rules for myself where I had to do it no matter what. I had to write. And if I skipped a day, I had to go back and reflect upon that day before. So I always had this really interesting ritual of journaling, and journaling about what happened in my life and what was going on. And so from a really early age, I was into writing and creating and really reflecting. And journaling was something that kept me sane and kept me reflecting back on my actions, which some of them I'm not proud of, right? Some of them I'm not proud of, but a lot of the times it takes that reflection to then learn and grow from what you're experiencing as a child. And, that's what that was for me. And then on the side with my mom, I had a great relationship with my mom when I was younger, and we kind of really struggled during my teen years, like when I was really hormonal. So I would say that's where my mom really shaped me, because, she pushed back and I pushed back more, and then she pushed back. I mean, that was like, she did not let up, and I didn't either, and I think that period in my life really shaped me as well.
Like in what way?
My mom was so caring and compassionate when we were children. She would come in and rub our backs until we fell asleep. I mean, she was just the best mom. And talk about later in life how we had our differences in terms of when I was going through puberty and things like that, because we did butt heads a lot. But I deeply love my mother, and I have so much respect for her raising my sister and I know that I was a pain in the fucking ass. So I just have so much respect for her. And, she taught me so many things. I mean, she taught me a lot about friendship and loyalty, and having a friend, our neighbor and her roommate in college, Janice, who's the mother of the 3 boys that I grew up with. That friendship and that loyalty that she had to her best friend, that's something that I take with me into my relationships with my best friends. And she's a strong woman. She's athletic. She, to this day, she's out there biking. She goes to the Y. She's all over the place in terms of activities and being outdoors. She loves the ocean. She loves the beach. And she really created this like wild side for me. And, later in life, I find out that my mom was like a rebel, and she was like smoking cigarettes behind her mom's back and all this other stuff. She doesn't smoke anymore, but she tested the boundaries. And I think that I really get that from my mom, those testing of the boundaries. And although we butted heads when I was in my teen years, I really think that we have more in common than we think. And not just because I look identical to her, but I think we have a lot in common in terms of our personalities. And she's just very, very strong. And I appreciate that. And she's such a great partner to my dad. And And, they're not without tiffs, but it was something where when I was growing up, they didn't really fight. I maybe saw like one fight that I remember when I was younger, but there was a lot of conflict resolution. There was a lot of not agreeing, but making it so that they worked through that not agreeing part of whatever they were dealing with. And we were able to see that as kids. We weren't seeing like blow-ups. Like we weren't seeing some things that I think kids see these days that maybe used to be a little bit more hidden or behind the curtain. But we definitely saw conflict resolution. I think that really helped in terms of what I took out of that into my life and how I resolve conflict here and now. And, everyone needs help. So, James and I have been going through the Allison Armstrong program, which is amazing. You start with a foundation, which is what I think my parents gave me, and then you can kind of grow from there. But yeah, my mom's beautiful. I look identical to her. I'm like her little mini me, and I definitely think we have more in common than maybe we show, but she is just such a wonderful, beautiful soul, and she gets me. She's not judgmental. I think there's points in my life where she's questioned some of the decisions that I've made, but looking back, she knows that they were out of love. They weren't because of an ill will. So when I was younger, my mom was more about like rules, like, okay, learning to set the table correctly. We always had dinner together. Unless it was like I was at a soccer game or something like that. Like we knew our manners. We didn't just like willy-nilly get up and leave the table. You had to excuse yourself from the table. You had to wash your hands. There were a lot of things that were old school rules of the house. And when I got into the stage of I'm too cool for school, like I'm in middle school, like I'm way too cool for my mom, right? It was a tumultuous time in my teenage years. Like I would lock myself in my room. I wouldn't let my mom in. She did not tolerate that type of stuff. And I would run away. I would jump out the window. My window was considered the first story, but when I jumped down, it was like a second story because we had a basement underneath my window, and I would jump out the window, like to get out. I don't even know what I was doing, like to go hang out with people or whatever. I wasn't really ever doing anything like super bad, but I just wanted to break the rules for some reason. Like I was always mischievous. Like I just like, I don't know.
Jump out the window?
I would always jump out the window. I'm telling you. Yeah, it was, I don't know. Here's what I think. I don't think that, and I know we're talking about past and we can dive deeper, but I don't think like the biography of how I grew up, and I don't think that's my destiny or my past equaling my future, because I think I'm totally different right now. But I know that it shaped me in some way, shape, or form, and I think the biggest way, like going through the memories and the reflection is wonderful, and like my past in no way has dictated my future, because I think it's a choice, and we have to get resourceful in our lives in order to change. And that's what I've done. But my parents really gave me the tools to do that, because life is all about choices and belief, and you can commit and focus to something and you can achieve it. And my parents may have shaped some of that, but they certainly didn't make those choices for me later on in life, if that makes sense. When I started to grow up, it was kind of like, okay, I don't really give a shit what anyone thinks about me. If my family has energy to shit on me for something, which they actually really don't, that would be their problem, right? Which is my mindset. It wouldn't define who I am. So yeah, I have so much love for my family, my mom, my dad, my sister.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. And I just think that it's important for our listeners to know some of our biography and our history, because like you said, it is a choice, right? Like it's a choice, and it's a decision every day. And you can either let your family bring you down, if depending on what kind of childhood you had, or you can be your own guide of like source of guidance, and have that reflection and self-awareness and move forward.
For me, success with my family has been defined by authenticity and honesty and not giving a shit about anyone else's opinion, family or otherwise. And, I'm filled with respect and gratitude and integrity, but authenticity for me is the more important piece, because I do not practically think about what anyone else thinks about me, and that includes my family. I love my parents deeply. I love my sister. I love my extended family. And I'm lucky that my parents never pressured me in any certain direction. I'm lucky that they didn't coddle me. I'm lucky that they didn't continue paying for things for me as I grew into an adult, because I think that's crippling to children. And I think that that's, a problem that we have nowadays. And, I went against my parents. They pushed back on me, but I attribute the relationship that I have with them now to this, because I don't resent them, because I always stayed true to myself. And talk about authenticity. I'm staying true to myself and not caring what anyone fucking thinks about me, including my parents. But I know that they're proud of me, and I feel in my heart deeply that they love me. I just know it. It's not even something that you can put into words.
So, going a little bit more into family, and then we'll kind of switch it over to some other topics. We've talked a lot about your parents and your grandparents. I want to know what it was like being, the younger child in the family, the youngest, and, what was your relationship like with your sister? How was that like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but I think I did. I was born on Cape Cod, and I lived in East Sandwich my entire childhood. So I was there, I went through kindergarten through 8th grade, and then I went to high school in Sandwich. So I was there my entire life. And just to kind of paint the picture for people that don't know what Cape Cod is like, it's kind of sheltered. It's almost like a little peninsula, almost an island, right? You have to take a bridge to get here over a body of water or a canal. And it's a non-diverse area, and maybe a little bit more so diverse nowadays, but when I was growing up in Sandwich, there was no diversity. So, and I definitely did not realize the beauty of where I lived until I left and then came back. So that's just something to note. And being the youngest with my sister, first of all, my sister is amazing. She's an amazing mom. She's an amazing friend, and she taught me a lot. And we were pretty opposite. I was loud. I was really loud, energetic, mischievous 100% of the time, fun, intelligent, artistic. Like, I was out there in your face. Like, I was the kid that wasn't afraid to go up to somebody and start talking to them, no matter who they were. My sister, on the other hand, being older, she was, I don't know why, but she was really shy. She was definitely way more intelligent than I am, just in terms of like book smarts. Like, she was always so smart, and I wanted to be like her in that way. But she was really shy, and I felt like we were opposites, but we got along in that we held some certain things in common. So my sister's also really musical. My mom's a music teacher, so it kind of makes sense. When we were really young, we played the violin together. My sister and I, we took lessons together, and then, played the piano. I then, wanting to be loved by my dad, I started playing the drums, because I was like trying to be a boy, right? So I'm playing the drums. My sister, on the other hand, starts playing the flute, which is such a feminine instrument. So we kind of like had this split in terms of musicality. So we were similar, but we were different in a lot of ways. My sister she is just somebody I completely admire, and not just in the way that she's a wonderful mother, but she truly cares about other people. She's in social work, and her whole entire purpose is helping out other people, especially children who are in sour situations. And she is committed to it, and she's got her master's degree in social work, and it's something that I've just been so proud of seeing her grow, because she's always been very highly intellectual, always been really smart, but it's just been lovely to see her grow into a new type of a human, finding love with her husband John. Just beautifully transforming. And when I say my sister and I were polar opposites, I truly believe that, even down to our beliefs religiously and spiritually. She's a little bit more religious than I am in terms of her Christianity, and at least in college she was a lot more in tune with her religion than I was. I was more, okay, I'm spiritual, but I'm spiritual in the way that I'm barefoot on the earth, and I'm more kind of like a hippie spiritual type of a person. Whereas my sister was very strict. She had rules for herself as well. Her rules were more on, I'm not going to have sex until marriage, which I did not follow that rule. That's something where I was more exploratory in college in terms of like my sexual presence and my sexual being and my sexuality. But that's something that I love about her. I love that we're not the same. I love that we're literally completely different human beings, and I can go to her for certain things. I can go to her for anything, really. That's one thing I can say about my sister in terms of family. She would never judge me, and she will love me no matter what. I've probably done some awful things to her as a child, like, when you think back, but she doesn't judge me, and she sees me for who I am, and she doesn't necessarily agree with everything that I believe in. We didn't agree that she was having her first kid, Luke, and she really wanted our entire family to go and get re-up on all of our shots, vaccinations, things like that, which I completely understand, and I respect her opinion there. But it was something where I didn't necessarily have that personal belief for myself. I don't put anything into my body. I don't even take Advil, aspirin, or anything like that. So everything that I'm putting into my body is completely natural, and that's just my belief. And I'm really hardcore about my beliefs. I'm whole foods plant-based. I am only putting plants into my body. And so I didn't want to go get those vaccinations. And so I made a conscious decision that I'm not going to do that. And the repercussions of not doing that were that, she didn't want me necessarily to see Luke when he was first born. But I completely respect that, because those are her beliefs and I have my beliefs. And I have such a good relationship with her that I don't think that that is something that would ever pull us apart. We're not petty in that way. And honestly, I feel closer to her for that experience, because we can look at it now and say we're different, and we can celebrate our differences. And by God, I eventually got to meet Luke about 3 months after he was born, and he was just this beautiful bundle baby of joy. And she's got a second kid, Levi, and I love them both dearly. And that's just part of her being this protective mother. And again, that's something that I look up to. She's a wonderful mother, and I hope to bring that to my future family with James, and that motherhood and that family life and that caring and joy and respect and discipline. I hope to bring that to a future family. And James has 2 kids, so him and I have had deep conversations about how we are going to integrate our family, because it's not the romance novel, it's fucking life. And families are quote unquote modern now, right? Modern family is a real thing. And we need to celebrate those types of diversity. We need to celebrate those differences. And there's a way that you can make it beautiful. And that's what we hope to bring to our family. And in terms of how was it being younger, I loved being the youngest. I looked up to her as a sister. And we also had amazing neighbors that I consider my brothers. There were 3 boys that lived next door. My mom's roommate in college lived next door to us. So my mom's best friend is next door, and she had 3 boys. And my mom and dad had 2 girls. So really our families were married in terms of Christmases and Cousin's Day. And we were always married in terms of our families being together. And so those boys were Mark, Jamie, and Eric, and they were the Hannahs. So they would keep me straight. The youngest, Eric, was about 4 years older than me. He would beat me up. It was great. It shaped me. I was always the youngest in that crew. They were all older. All the boys were older. So it was kind of just I was tripped, I was pushed, I was called names. But I learned a lot, and I learned how to be alone, and I learned how to be really tough and really gritty. And for anyone that is listening that's from New England, the people here, not the people, but people maybe, yeah, but the kids here are brutal. It is brutal to grow up in New England, and it really shapes you. It makes you a hard person. And I think that people have this misconception that everyone from New England is hard or rude or whatever it is, but the kids are brutal. And so when you get bullied that much and it's constant, then you build this wall around yourself. And I want to call it grit, but some of it's also not good in terms of the wall that you have to break through. So, I encourage people that if you meet somebody from New England, maybe know that there's a wall there, and there could be an inner gooiness on the inside, but you have to break through it,
Wow. Okay. So you just went into the bullying aspect. Was this you and your sister both getting bullied?
I can't really speak for her experiences. I would say, like, I was really small, and again, it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. If you're little and you're like not up to the standards of like normalcy, quote unquote, then you're gonna get bullied. I was bullied on the bus mainly by guys. So I was bullied by women as well. When I was bullied by guys, it was when I was younger, up until
How old were you when this started? I was just gonna ask.
I don't remember, but from what I can remember, it was probably like when I was like 7 or 8, maybe. But I don't remember. I don't remember like my quote unquote brothers bullying me like super hard. I remember they bullied me like when we were playing soccer. Like I consider them family. Like I consider them my brothers. The youngest one, Eric, he's like one of my best friends now. So hi, Eric. He would like trip me or something. Like if we were playing soccer, like he would come up and stick his leg through my legs and I'd fucking go down hard, and like I would go home crying at some point because, I mean, again, he was brutal, but he was my brother. In terms of outside my family, people bullying me, like, yeah, absolutely. That shit happened on the bus, in school. I mean, again, kids were brutal. And it didn't just happen to me. Like, from my friend group, I can tell you that, like, most of the girls got bullied by the guys. And not in a way that's like, oh, they're flirting with us. Like, hindsight 2020, maybe they were. Maybe that's how they were taught by their parents in New England to flirt. But it was not good. But it shapes you. And again, being small, it's like, okay, you're kind of defenseless.
Yeah, and I also don't think that that's flirting, now that I look back at that. Um,
Yeah.
those statements that are made in schools and things like that where it's like, "Oh, honey, he's just flirting with you." No, that's the old paradigm. That's kind of setting up I think, a scenario for later on in the future, "Oh, your husband punched you in the face. He's just flirting with you." Like, no, there's
Yeah.
there's other ways. I think that's something that maybe kids are just not taught these kids are not taught how to express emotion, or they're taught to repress emotion, so they don't even know how to show what it is that they want to show. So in my eyes, bullying is bullying. And if it's causing another person pain and suffering and making, and for absolutely no reason, I mean, there should never be a reason for it, but I feel you. Like, the bullying, it shapes you. And how would you say that it shaped you? And you said not just grit, like, yeah, you said grit, and I get that you want to be strong, but like, how else would you say that it probably put up some walls and barriers?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it definitely put up walls in terms of like trusting people and how soon I would trust somebody. It put up walls in terms of how soon to be playful with a friendship, or like joking, or like I can give an example too of like a time when there was a time even when parents would bully. So I did ballet for a really long time. I was on point, and we were doing the Nutcracker, and I had finally landed this like solo in the introduction of the Nutcracker, and I was doing this gig, and it was a point dance, and I was so excited, and I was like, oh my god, yes, like this is it, this is my dream, I'm so excited. And I had a dance teacher, she was amazing. Her name's Janine, and she was helping me throughout months and months and months of rehearsals, right? She's a beautiful woman, beautiful teacher. And so there was a situation where I was practicing my pirouettes on the stage right before the show. It was probably like 10 or 15 minutes before the curtains were going to go up. And I was just like, okay, I'm in the first act, so I'm going to just practice real quick and like try to hit my marks. And, there's an X on the stage where I'm supposed to stand and all this stuff. So I'm just like super nervous, super anxious, super nervous, like anyone would be, right? But when I perform, I always nail it. When I'm practicing, like I might mess up, but if I'm in a performance, like historically, I would always nail it because I would just have so much adrenaline. But beforehand, I was really nervous, and so I wasn't hitting this like double pirouette that I was supposed to do, which is not even that difficult if you're a dancer, but I was just not hitting it all the way around. But I wasn't falling or anything. I was just practicing, right? And so this parent, this quote unquote dance mom, right, comes out of nowhere. Like, who even knows why she's allowed to be backstage, but neither here nor there. And she grabbed me and was like, you shouldn't be dancing on point. And she had children in the company, and I think that she was a little bit pissed off that I had this role and maybe wanted her daughter to have gotten this role or whatever it may be. I have no idea what her motivations were. But she had the audacity to come up to me and start bullying me about my dancing when it's like, lady, it's just a nutcracker and I'm probably like 12 years old. You know what I mean? Like, calm the hell down. So unbeknownst to my teacher and our directors and things like that. So then she goes to the directors and stuff. And again, 5 minutes before the show is going to start. And she tells them that she doesn't think that I should be dancing this part. And they came up to me and they were like, hey, we talked to so-and-so and she said that, you know, you're going to hurt yourself and this is dangerous and she's concerned for you, and like completely opposite of what she told me, right? And it was really manipulative, and basically they were like, yeah, we don't want you to dance on point for the solo. And I was like, you're going to tell me like 5 minutes before I go on stage that I can't use my point shoes, but I've literally never practiced in flats, which is totally different. Right? Like, if you're a dancer, you know that like dancing on flat is totally different than dancing on point. And if you've practiced on point, you would know. And so as a little girl, I'm there like, are you kidding me right now? And so me being somebody, like, this is where I take in like the integrity, right? It's like, I was not going to let that woman bully the shit out of me. And so I went to them and I said, okay, well, if I'm not dancing on point, then I'm not dancing it. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to dance it. And they just kind of sat there and they were like, well, they had no idea what to do. And I went backstage and I told there was an understudy, a girl, thank you, Marsha. She stepped in for me. She was doing the dance a different night as well. And so basically I was like, you go for it. You got it. And she was like, holy fucking shit. And she changed into the gear and she got out there and she danced the part. And I never danced it, which was a dream of mine. But the integrity of being bullied that much and not wanting that woman to like win was more powerful for me than doing something that I didn't think was right in my heart. And so I wouldn't allow it.
You end up dancing it. Why didn't you fight for the spot? Do you ever think back to that? Rather than just giving it up, rather than just like giving it to someone else that you thought could do it. Like, let's just say if you were to go, you know, back, and I wonder if you've thought about this because it seems like it was a pivotal moment, and you know, a bully dance mom, and not allowing her to win. Did you think about fighting for the spot for yourself?
Oh, I did fight for the spot. So I mean, it was like a screaming battle backstage. This woman was yelling at me in front of the whole entire dance company. Her daughter chimed in and started yelling at me. Like, it was like a very serious bullying scenario, and everyone was like dead silent. Because they were like, what the fuck is going on? Because it was crazy. And at that time, we're almost going on, and all the teachers and the director they're on stage, so they can't see any of this happening in the dressing rooms.
Where were your parents? Were your parents around?
They were in the audience. My parents were in the audience expecting me to dance, and my grandmother was there. First time she'd ever came to see me dance, and basically, like, my mom tells me the horror story of on her end, because they actually like went out on stage and made an announcement before the show started. The part of so-and-so will be danced by somebody else. Thank you. And then they like made an announcement, and my mom was like, what? And she thought that I was hurt. So she, at that moment, ran backstage. But after, like, by the time she got backstage, like, the show had already started and that girl was already out there. I asked her to do it for me, not because I didn't want to do it. It's because I was standing in my integrity. Like, I was always very clear on what I was to stand for as a human being. And I did not stand for people that were in the wrong, and I did not appease them. And there's like that stubborn piece coming in again, and like the pride to it, but it wasn't important to me what anyone thought about me. What was important was that that woman knows that that's not okay, and that could be childish, but I was a child. So, but it was a pivotal moment. It was a pivotal moment and it wasn't that I didn't want to do it, and it wasn't that I could have done it, because I was getting shunned So it wasn't like I couldn't even get onto the stage. Like I wouldn't have been able to get out there if I wanted to, unless I made a scene and like fucking ran on stage and knocked somebody over, you know, like, which I wouldn't do. And, you know, the girl that I had asked to do the dance for me knew the dance. I mean, she knew it. She could do it. So it wasn't like the night was ruined. Like nobody knew, except I was like, this is not what I stand for. This is not who I am. This is not what I will put up with. And I put a stake in the ground. But it was a pivotal moment. And my poor mother is thinking that I got hurt. And she was really mad at me for that. Like my mom was pissed at me for not dancing that because I wasn't going to deal with that. But that's just an example. I know we went kind of deep into that, but that's just an example of like a parent bullying.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you actually do any other ballet in any other studios afterwards, or?
I did not. No, I stopped dancing ballet after that. I went into like hip hop dancing and I was doing jazz and like some other forms of dance. And then when I got to high school, I started cheerleading and I was on the cheerleading team, and that really just kind of took the place of it in my heart. I was still dancing. I was still in a community, and it was just much more, it was a beautiful transition, if you will. Like the dancing part of my life had just like stripped itself away. And then I got into cheerleading, which I did in high school. And then I also cheered at NC State for the Wolfpack in college. So I was like, I transitioned into being a cheerleader, and I worked really hard at it. You know, I had to take gymnastics classes because I hadn't done gymnastics as a kid. And a lot of times cheerleaders just come to the table with those skills. And so I joined the gymnastics team. I was like working my ass off and hustling to become like a really wonderful cheerleader. I was taking private lessons, everything I could to try to be a cheerleader in college, which is what I wanted to do athletically. So it kind of transitioned into that.
Yeah. And it seems like, and you know, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about college, but before we do, it seems like that moment really did something for you in ballet, where it's almost like you wanted to close that chapter. And I wonder if maybe there was, you know, that's why you went into hip hop and other forms of dance, because you still have that part of you still lives on, right? But it seems like there's some maybe negative associations with ballet.
Yeah, it's definitely a pain for me, for sure. You know, I don't think I would have stopped dancing if that didn't happen. But again, there's only so much time for all the activities that I was doing. You know, I was playing soccer, I'm doing ballet, I was cheerleading, I'm doing theater, I'm taking singing lessons. Like my childhood, in terms of like all the activities I did athletically and artistically, it was insane. So it was like a good release. It was like, oh fuck, okay, I can finally release this thing.
And I mean, like, you know, when I talk about, like, it seems like that was you know, there was a negative association there, just for the audience to know that just because that's there doesn't mean it has to live there, right? We're allowed to let that go.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So, you know, going into college, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I left the sheltered life of Cape Cod, where there's no diversity, and I went to college at NC State, and I was cheerleading there and studying international business and Spanish. And yeah, I mean, I met some of the best friends of my life, but it was a really big shocker to move from New England right into the South, in the heart of the South, and there was tons of diversity in North Carolina, and I really am grateful for that, because I did not grow up with people of diverse backgrounds, and it really opened my eyes to having different types of friends and different races of friends. And I was really lucky that I made the decision to leave and to get out of my comfort zone, which, you know, it's always something I wanted to do. I never wanted to stay in Massachusetts and like have that be my only experience. Like I knew I wanted to leave for college, and so it was obviously a huge step in my life, but I had to do it. It was something I had to do, and I'm so glad that I did.
How was it living away from your family?
Yeah, I mean, leaving the bubble, if you will. I didn't really have issues leaving my family. I mean, of course, I missed my mom, my dad, my sister, but I had so many mentors that came into my life that shaped me, like not only like my cheerleading coaches and friends that I made in college, but also, I stayed in North Carolina after college as well. And there's just so many mentors that came into my life that wouldn't have if I had been coddled by my parents or like still living on my parents' paycheck, which I highly do not believe in. It was something that I created a family in North Carolina that I love, and I surrounded myself with people and created this net of people that were mentors and personal coaches. And a few of them that I've known for, a decade. Paige Goss, she was on our podcast episode 1, and she's been a huge mentor of mine as a younger businesswoman. And Lydia Shimofenik, who was also on our podcast, she shaped me into more of like an advanced leader and professional and coach and speaker and business owner. So there's so many people that I consider my family that I kind of like called into my life. And those people really shaped me in terms of probably transitioning from college into professional life. I had my first bosses, Matt Watts and Al. They're both since passed, but they shaped me into a wonderful, wonderful businesswoman in a corporate environment. Zach Earls is somebody who I look up to and love, and he's in North Carolina. Sheldon Walitsky, Doug Wise, Errol Dwebler, who we just had on this podcast. So all these people are kind of the people that I wanted to surround myself with. And I kind of willed them and manifested them into my life to be these father figures, these mentors, these coaches, these people that I can surround myself with, that I can lean on, in addition to my best friends that were around me. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have an issue leaving my family, if that makes sense.
So what about moving to California?
Yeah.
How did that happen? And, I don't know if the audience knows, but you should know Jess is a tiny home owner. So let's talk about the California move and the tiny home. And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let's get into it. So essentially, I was living in North Carolina. I had an amazing job, and I got an opportunity with this job to open up an office for them in Boston. And so I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I'm going to go back home. Like, this is awesome, being near my family. And so I moved back to Boston, and I ended up staying there for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then I was thinking it over, and I was like, holy shit, like, I'm not actually happy here. Like, I don't feel like I've seen the world yet. And I'm back in this environment. Boston's more diverse than Cape Cod, but I was like, I'm back in this environment where I'm like stuck in this pattern of like reaching back out to old high school friends. Not that that's a bad thing, because I reached out to some really beautiful friendships. But at the same time, I was like, I'm not growing right now because I'm falling into this pattern of hanging out with people that I used to hang out with. And so I took an opportunity with work. One of my bosses, who I mentioned earlier, Zach, reached out to me, and he was like, hey, we've got this opportunity for you in San Diego. Like, this is what I can offer to you. And I was like, hell yeah. Had never been to San Diego, had never stepped foot in California in my life, but I was like, I need this change. And so I moved to San Diego, and I absolutely loved it. I lived there for about a year and a half-ish, maybe a little more. And then I got another opportunity with work and career in tech, and I moved up to Silicon Valley. I was working in San Jose for a little while. I worked in San Francisco for quite some time. And then that leads me into your tiny home question, which is the cost of living in California is obviously very high. I think everyone knows that. That's like a very common thing to know. And so I was like, no more, like I think I paid $2,300 for my place in San Diego, which is crazy. And then I was paying about $2,000, and I had a couple of roommates in San Francisco. So I said, no more. Like, I'm an adult. I'm, I think I was 28 or 29. And I said, I'm going to save up my money my hard-earned money, and I'm going to get myself a tiny home. And so it wasn't just because of finances. I mean, obviously a lot of other reasons, sustainability, it's eco-friendly, solar, compost toilet, like everything that was near and dear in terms of my values for the environment and for the planet. And so I downsized. I got rid of shit. I sold furniture. I put some stuff in storage, but most of it I just got rid of, and I started minimalizing clothes, everything. I just like downsized my entire life, and I custom designed, hand designed from scratch this tiny home, and reached out to a builder, and they were like, yeah, we can do it. And tweaks were made, and then all of a sudden I have this beautiful tiny home. And so I had the tiny home originally in Berkeley, California. So I went from San Francisco to Berkeley, and I was in a beautiful spot and right in the heart of Berkeley, which I loved Berkeley. And yeah, so that's how I got this tiny house. And yeah, maybe my parents and my family thought I was crazy, but I like switched over to minimalism and a deeper understanding of why you own something and why you have these close emotional distractions with consumer purchases, and how much insecurity goes into that, and how much wanting validation from other people goes into that. And I stopped buying things for other people's opinions, and I was like, nope, these are my necessities. This is what I need. And I actually had more quality items than just shit and stuff. Yeah, so I'm living in this tiny house. I became whole food plant-based. I'm a minimalist now. I'm preaching like greens before coffee, alkalize before you acidify. I'm doing this Wim Hof priming. I've got this killer morning routine. And my family's over there probably being like, who the hell is this girl? Why is she so crazy? And what is she doing? She's starting a business from scratch. Like, what? And I think that sometimes they might think I'm crazy, but I love it. I absolutely love it. And I could not be where I am today without the people that shaped me, my life, including my parents, my sister, and my extended family. You know, so for me, it's like, oh, my family might think I'm losing my mind, but they eventually were like, okay, I think we can get on board with this. And they came out to visit and they had a really good time, but I don't think it's for everyone. I don't think living in a tiny house is for everyone, but it was for me. And I still have my tiny home, and since then I've invested in other real estate as well. But yeah, I mean, it's something I'm really proud of, that I actually I did that. I took my investment and I invested in this tiny home, and it's something that I'll have forever.
Yeah, that's amazing. We can go into like,
we could do a different episode on tiny homes.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just how cool it is to live that minimal lifestyle, and how nice it is to have that spaciousness almost, even though it's tiny. You just have so much more space in your life because of the lack of clutter, basically. Which is great, lack of clutter. I want to just really quickly, because we went into like a really deep dive of your history and your family life, and moving into like college and your professional life a little bit, but I want to just ask a little bit about your love life.
Yeah, and I think we'll
do another segment on that.
Yeah, we'll do another segment on love pillar, but yeah, I mean, my love life's been up and down. Like I consider my time in Cape Cod, like I dated one guy all throughout middle school and high school, on and off, and obviously I had other relationships in between, but he was a pivotal person in my life. Shout out Bobby Steves. And we didn't have a perfect relationship by any means, but he was kind of somebody that I considered being like my childhood sweetheart. I thought I was going to marry him when I was in high school because I was just like a romantic like that, but it was one of those things that didn't work out, and I left and went somewhere else for college, and we drifted apart and whatever, but we're still good. We're still friends to this day. I got a message from him the other day, giving me an update on his family and his mom. And that's somebody that was very pivotal in my growth. And then, moving to North Carolina, I had some relationships there, but I consider North Carolina to be like where I met. Can you hear my freaking cat? I can't even handle it. So North Carolina was where I met the love of my life, James, and we dated for about 6 years in North Carolina. It was beautiful. I had my first apartment with him, just like in terms of like an apartment with a guy. And, we went through some adversity, and, I was moving to Boston for that new job. And so he had to find something in New England, and he ended up finding a job on Martha's Vineyard. So we both were moving back here, and it was just, we didn't move at the same time. We were doing long distance for a little while. And then, I had my experiences in California. I went to San Diego, I was in San Francisco, Berkeley, all of that. And like, I was dating other people, and I was having like the time of my life. But this man kept coming back to me. He was writing me letters, sending me flowers, just always, when are we going to be together? How can we be together? What can I do to get us to be together? And he would come out and visit California all the time, come to the tiny home, hang out. Like, we would go on trips. We went to Tahoe. Like, we went to the Bahamas. We would try to see each other, and I just couldn't shake him. And so, finally we now we're together. We live on Martha's Vineyard. We're back in New England. It's another chapter that we're doing in our lives. We just started a business together, coffee company, and we're living the dream. So my love life has had ups and downs, but I feel like I'm with the right person that I'm meant to be with now. And we'll dig in more on that later, I guess. But yeah, he's considered family, 100%, for sure.
We can definitely dig more into the love life later, but that's a whole other segment. I just wanted to acknowledge another really important person in your life and to make sure that he was a part of this conversation. I feel like we touched on a lot today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for the listeners to know about you, or any last words for this segment?
Yeah, I'll just kind of close it out. In terms of family, I think that, like I mentioned at the beginning, we can have our family that's genetically our family, but then we can create our family as well. So in terms of people listening, again, your biography is not your destiny, and your past does not equal your future. And so as you're going through your own personal family memories and life stories and things that shaped you, and these pivotal moments, and we barely brushed the surface, right? But getting resourceful and learning how to change and to focus and to believe and to commit and to make choices and to achieve them. And I think that includes family and exploring where you are today so that you can appreciate your family and where you came from.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jess. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Alana.
Thanks for sharing your life with us and getting deep with us. And you guys know where to find us. Bold and Vulnerable Podcast on Instagram, Facebook. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Yes, spread the love, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Bold and Vulnerable Podcast. For more information on today's speaker, please visit us at boldandvulnerablepodcast.com.
And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading the love by being bold and vulnerable. Thank you. We love you.